Hey guys, we're here at Kendale Products Limited in our test kitchen in Fort Erie, Ontario. We're the Canadian distributor for Southern Pride Smokers, and today we're going to show you how to prep these 4 incredible proteins so they're ready to load directly into the smoker and come out perfect every single time. We have beef brisket, bone-in pork butt, spatchcock chicken, and St. Louis side ribs. With that said, let's get to work. All right, first things first, we're gonna get into some chicken prep. We're gonna spatchcock a few birds so they can go onto the smoker. Spatchcocking is pretty straightforward. It's a method to flatten out the chicken so it cooks evenly. It makes it an even thickness across the bird, and it'll actually yield a quicker cook time with a better result than if you were to cook it whole like this. So all I'm gonna do is have the spine down to the board with the breast facing up. And I'm gonna sneak the knife. You wanna use like an 8 or a 10-inch chef's knife that's very sharp. I'm gonna sneak this inside the carcass to the right of the spine. And our goal here is just to remove the spine. So I'm gonna send it in here and press down aggressively till you meet the board. Looks like we've done a good job getting through the one side. We'll do the same on the left side of the spine, like that. And if I lift up, the spine should be separate. A couple little strings attached. Spine goes off to the side. You can use that for a stock if you like. And then the last move is just to relieve the tension in the sternum. So we send the knife through just for about a ½ an inch, and it allows the chicken to be opened up a little more. Sits nice and flat on our board, and it'll go off to our sheet pan where we will spice it later on with the other ones. All right, we've finished butchering all of our chicken into spatchcocks. We're gonna roll right into spicing the chicken. It's an easy one-step process using our Southern Pride poultry blend. I always like to start by seasoning the bottom side of the chicken so we can flip it over, season the top, and lay it right back on the pan, and then it's ready to be loaded right into the smoker. So this is a pre-mix. I'm going to use my dirty chicken head on the bottle. I recommend just sanitizing the container after. And I like to open it in the wide mouth and control the spice just with my angle here. And we're keeping it high up off the board, just evenly spreading it over the chicken until you like the level of spice. It's a really well balanced dry rub. You don't need too much of it, and it cooks up really beautifully. So we've done the bottom, flip it over gently. We cover the top completely with spice. Something I like to always make sure I do, lift up the wing, see a nice little blank spot there, and we want to fill that in with spice so it's nice and tasty when people bite into it. Do it on both sides. That is all done. I'm gonna run through prepping the rest of these chickens, and we'll move on to spicing up some ribs. Okay, our chicken's all done. It's spiced, back on a pan. It's sitting in the fridge while we get into some rib prep. What we're looking at here is some 40 to 44 ounce St. Louis pork side ribs. This is a very common rib to serve in a restaurant or at a festival. It is different from a baby back rib. I prefer these. I think they eat really well. I think they have a really nice high level of fat in the meat. So that's what we're gonna be showing you today. If you choose to do some baby backs instead of side ribs, the prep for me would be pretty much the same, and it's very simple. We'll flip one over and I'll show you what it looks like. This one I've already removed the membrane on, and you can tell because it doesn't have that whitewash look over top of it. And I'm gonna show you how to remove a membrane on the next rack. This is not by any means an essential step. This is something that is preferential. It's the root of a lot of arguments on the internet, and you don't have to do it when you cook. I don't personally do it when I cook ribs, but I wanted to show how to do it if that's something you wanted to get into in your restaurant or food service operation. My argument is that it can stay on there. It can hold some of the juices in on the bottom side of the rack of ribs, and then once it comes out, if you're gonna be grilling the ribs, the membrane's gonna burn off and get crispy and actually be a nice little bite. So regardless of that, let's show how we get a membrane off. We're going to use a butter knife and just a cotton towel that's clean. Have that ready. And I'll have the rack kind of sideways and just find a way under it near one of the first couple of bones. And we just go in with the knife like that. It's starting to lift up for us. And you can see it's under the membrane now. And I'll just kind of make some space. This is when the cotton rag comes in. It's generally pretty slippery, so to add some grip, it can slip off like that out of your fingers, especially with gloves. So just do the same motion, but with the rag, get a lot more grip, and you just kind of go for a rip and see what you can get on the first pull. That's a pretty good one, not my worst. I'll do the same with the knife, get under here, whatever's left. And I was able to do that with the glove because I wrapped it around my finger. Gets us all the way to here, and we're about 90% of the way there. Do the last little bit here, if I can get it. There we go. Underneath. Use our rag to get that little tab. Just a little bit left. And you know what? I'm gonna call that done. So that's a St. Louis side pork rib with the membrane removed. You could see, let's compare it to one that has the membrane on still. This looks a little more milky and washed out because it has that membrane on, and this is wide open and exposes all the intercostal muscles and all the marbled fat that's in between them. My fear with removing a membrane, and this could be just bad knowledge, but is that if this renders down in a cook, it's going to drip out if there's no membrane there to keep it in. But they turn out beautiful both ways. Do it how you like it. There is no wrong way to make delicious food. That's the membrane removal process. I'm not going to remove them on the other racks because I think they cook great, and now we have a bit of a comparison. So I flipped them all bone side up on a sheet pan like this. They fit really nicely. I always spice the bottom first, much like we did the chicken. That way when we flip it over for the final spice, they're just ready to go back into the fridge and they don't need any more handling. For this one, we're using our premium blend, also made by Southern Pride. This is a sweet rub, definitely our most popular of the line, and it goes really well on a lot of things. Best for me is on pork. So we're going to use it on our pork butts. We're also going to use it on our ribs. So same method, keep it nice and high for even distribution, and just go left to right to evenly coat the ribs. And you can run through the whole pan here. Get them all done at once. Spicing the bottom of a rack is really important, I think, for the quality of the bite once they're cooked, so that you're not left with just topside flavor. You get the full 360 flavor on these things. And their ribs are moist enough. You don't need a binder. You don't need to add anything to it. You don't need oil, mustard, anything like that. The spice just sticks to the moisture and lifts it up. None of it falls off at all. Flip them over. Do the same on the top side. As generous as you like. This will add color to the ribs, of course, during the cook, given that there's sugar and paprika in this rub. So just be nice and generous. It'll really bode well to the quality of the finished product. That right there is a perfectly seasoned rib in my book. I think a lot of people would agree with me. So we're gonna put this pan to the side. We have 5 more racks to do, and that's rib prep. Nice and simple. All right, our ribs are all spiced up. They're dry brining in the fridge with our Southern Pride premium blend. It's gonna make a nice orangey, nice beautiful colored surface on those ribs, so when they go in the smoker, they come out pretty. Now it's time for brisket. This is arguably the highest maintenance item that you're going to be barbecuing, and there are many ways to do this. The spectrum of brisket prep is from completely untrimmed out of the package, spice it, throw it in the smoker, all the way down to competition, which is a really aggressive trim that focuses on aerodynamics and fat percentage and just getting the optimal cut on the brisket. Today we're going to kind of strike the balance. We're going to fall right in the middle. We're going to go somewhere between untrimmed and competition, and I think this is a manageable, sustainable level of trim that you can do in your restaurant or food service operation. So let's start with a bit of anatomy. This is a pretty nice size. I'd say it's probably a 11 or 12 pound brisket here. On one side, the taller side, this is called the point. This is one muscle that runs in a different direction than the flat, which is always the smaller side of the brisket. I've got it oriented in what I think is up and fat side up. I'm going to turn it around so you can see the other side. There's a pretty significant fat cap on here, and if we were to throw it in the smoker like this probably wouldn't render down too well because it's just too thick. It would end up like a jelly consistency, and from a barbecue perspective at your restaurant, you're probably going to be trimming that off and not serving it to the customer. And that's a shame because all the spice is going to be on top of this fat. You'd be wasting that spice, you'd be wasting your potential smoke ring that goes into the meat. So for that reason, we're going to trim it down a little bit. But not before we look at the bottom side. So this is still partially frozen. We still have some ice on there, and that is exactly where I want this brisket to be because it keeps the fat a little bit stiffer, and running a knife through it becomes a lot easier than when it's fully thawed and kind of floppy. So if I hold this up, it holds its shape pretty nicely. And let's start here on the bottom side. So you'll see the difference in meat color. We have a nice, beautiful red, pinky color on the bottom side from it coming out of the vac pack. But the edge generally gets a little bit freezer burnt or gray if it came in frozen, which a lot of brisket does. Our first move is going to just be take this edge off. Again, sharp knife makes your life a lot easier. and these were sharpened by Zach, so they're perfect. So just gonna run down here, and you'll notice when I'm trimming, I started the cut back here, immediately grabbed hold of this little edge of meat, and I'm running the knife while pulling, and it keeps me nice and straight, makes for one nice long cut, and that's our first piece of trim. So there's the difference: gray, freezer burnt; red, beautiful, ready to smoke. So we take the edge off. On the bottom, just look for any kind of frilly stuff that you don't want to see, little things like this. And all we're thinking of is stuff that might burn in the smoker and not be really nice to eat. Save us time later on. So I'm doing that here. I'm gonna round the corner a little bit for aerodynamics, so the smoke and the air in the convection oven moves around really freely. This edge is a little spiky, and that will, you know, we're cooking this for like 10 to 12 hours. It's gonna likely burn, so let's get it off of there. Start there and just gently pull it down. Okay, this is a bit extra fat we don't need. And it brings us to a famous part of the brisket. This is really, really hard fat. It's called a decal. Visible on the bottom, on the edge here, always on a brisket. But this actually is the start of the fat vein that runs between the flat muscle, which is shaped like this, and the point muscle, which is up here. So that decal runs all the way through to separate them. But on the edge of it, you got this huge lump, and we're gonna work carefully, just remove a significant portion of it, kind of like making an island out of it like this, just so that we don't end up with a big glob of unrendered garbage that's not going to be nice to eat for anyone. You might ask yourself at the end of this video if all of these trims are going to go and be wasted, but all of this can be sent through a meat grinder, mixed with maybe a lesser cut, like a chuck or something like that, and make really beautiful brisket blend burgers. And this decal's almost free. So, almost completely fat, it's really thick, not a great cook. So we remove that, got a nice little cavity here, and we're looking for any frills, any spikes. This edge is a bit thin, so I'm gonna square it off, just like that. And we can flip it over and have a look at this thing for the way it's gonna go in the smoker. Right away, notice this guy, it's not gonna be very well, so I have the knife flat across the brisket, and just making it over top like this, curving the knife down to the back and get the whole back off. Beautiful future burgers. Get the back nice and smooth. It left us this little tail. Again, just be really kind of smooth and round with it and make that nice and smooth like that. Next, we have to talk about kind of intramuscular fat. So in the point, there's probably 2 or 3 times as much fat between the muscle fibers, so it makes it a really tender, beautiful eating product. And for that reason, we don't want to have a bunch on the top. We don't need to have a bunch on the top to protect it. So I'm going to get this down almost to the meat so that we can just let the intramuscular fat do the work. So I'll start from the back like this. Get under, grab a hold. We can see we got to the meat a little bit, so I'll go up a bit from there and just kind of follow the shape of the brisket to about here, and then turn the knife out and escape so we don't take the fat off of the flat. The flat, not the fat, is a very lean part of the brisket. This fat cap is going to protect it from drying out in the smoker too much. It's going to provide a bit of flavor, and that, if we keep it down to about a ½ inch, is going to render beautifully and get into the meat. So it's a nice product. So have a look down this edge. We have a little ridge going. You know what I'm going to do to it? We're going to take it off, make this edge nice and smooth, and just follow the shape of the brisket to get it off. And that looks like a lot of fat in future burgers. Okay, this happens to be a really, really pretty brisket. This is a Canadian Prime, which is just one step above AAA. And you could tell that by just how beautiful all that marbling is. All the white that's mixed in with the muscle fibers, just, it's going to be an incredible, incredible cook. I can tell already. Going again at this fat just to expose a bit of the point, and then turn the knife out to escape, just like that. And feeling this point, or sorry, this flat, looking at the edge, we're at about a ½ inch right out of the package. And that's going to save us some time. I'm also pushing on the fat, feeling how soft it is. And it moves really nice. It's not too thick. I'm going to leave that just as is. We're going to spice it and cook it as you see it. And there we have it. A brisket that falls right between competition and untrimmed. I think this is a manageable level of trim you can do in your food service operation. I don't think it would take you more than 1.5 to 2 minutes once you get rolling through them and have some experience on a knife. And it's going to produce a beautiful product with a really high yield for your customer. So when it's time to serve it, you slice it, plate it, or you put it on a platter, it goes out the door. All right, that gets us through a basic brisket trim. I'm not saying that's the right way to do it. I think that's the way that gets me to a brisket that I'm happy to serve to any customer or any guest in my house. So let's move on to spicing. We're going to use a 6 or 8 inch deep hotel pan. Clear, stainless, doesn't matter. And 2 ingredients: kosher salt, black pepper. Specifically, this is 18 mesh butcher's pepper. Find the grain size is really nice on this to make a beautiful bark on the brisket. It's not too large that you're going to have offensive bites, and it's not too small that it's powdery and will cover the brisket before the salt gets a chance. So I'm going for a general 50-50 mix. This doesn't have to be an intensely scientific process. This can be a spice mix you have on the shelf in your restaurant. I just like to, we'll just dump a decent amount to cover the bottom of the pan and go for around the same amount of the butcher's pepper. Once that's in there, let's give it a good mix, because as soon as the brisket hits, whatever's there first is what gets first access to the surface of the brisket. And we want to make that as even of a race as possible between the salt and the pepper. Something I don't use is a binder. I don't find the need for it. I've never seen a real benefit to using mustard or oil as a binder, especially on brisket. Once we get the brisket in here, you'll see it's moist enough out of the package and after the trim that it can just pick up enough salt and pepper and do a full complete coverage on the meat without a binder. So that's what the mix looks like. It's a beautiful little even 50-50 salt and pepper. We have our beautiful trim brisket here. I'm going to go in top side first, get it in, move it around, kind of shove it up against the sides of the brisket just so we get it in, bring a little bit over top, and then we can flip it over and see a little blank spot there because it wasn't contacting. I just take a bunch, leaving it in the bin, cover the top of the brisket. Let's get the sides covered. I'm just cupping a decent amount in my hand and running it along the side of the brisket as it falls away. And you should be able to get all the edges done like that. I'll do the same on the left side, just like this. And that, to me, is a perfectly seasoned brisket once I get this spot on the bottom. That's where the decal was. And there we have it. This brisket is fully covered 360 degrees with salt and pepper, and it's ready to be loaded right into the smoker. It's gonna be awesome. All right, we are down to our last of the 4 meats that we're prepping on video today. We did our spatchcock chickens, we did our side ribs, we did our briskets. Now we're getting into our pork butt, which is another super simple prep. I'm gonna walk you through right now. This is our standard bone-in pork shoulder, pork butt. We have a beautiful, nice thick fat cap on top. I am going to trim this absolutely zero today. We are just going to get it ready to accept some spice. Make sure we cover all the surfaces, back on a pan, throw it in the fridge, and it's ready to be put in the smoker. Something I really love to do is score the fat cap on this pork butt. I do that, just nice sharp knife again, and we're just gonna make a pretty broad checkered pattern. Not going too deep, but all we're trying to do is get down through the fat to the nice lean meat that's inside of this butt. And we'll do it both ways, so we have nice parallel lines that way. Now we'll make a nice checkered pattern and just pull the knife through. This is going to increase the surface area. I don't know the math, but it's a lot more. So that when this starts to move and shrink and grow and render during a cook, the spice is able to get deeper into the meat, giving you a deeper flavor in your pulled pork. And it also allows the fat to render a lot easier because you are literally, I think, tripling or quadrupling the amount of surface area that each of these fat little cubes is exposed to in the cook. Now that we're scored, we've got a pan set up with our Southern Pride Premium blend. This is the same blend we put on the ribs. You don't have to use this. We just really love it on pork, so we're using it again. We sell it in those shakers that you saw in the previous rib video. Now we also sell it in our 35-pound bulk cases for high consumption. So all we did was scoop it out of the box, put it into a nice hotel pan here. And I'm gonna get the butt top down, roll it around a bit just to get the surfaces as covered as I can. touch the back, touch the nose of it, get the bottom into it. And now here's the important part, because of our scoring, we just want to get lots of spice, like way too much spice over top. It's a lot like sweeping sand on a new interlock driveway. That was a terrible, terrible analogy. So we want to get lots of spice on the top, on this scored surface, and just kind of push it around. And that way it finds its way, wiggle a little bit, finds its way into the crevices. So we get a beautiful, super deep, flavorful pork butt. I'm working with a partially frozen butt again. It's the same deal. When you're cutting through fat, you really want a little bit of structure there versus a fully thawed piece of fat, because it just doesn't go very well if it's not a little stiff. So now you can see how easy it is to prep a pork butt for really high quality pulled pork in like 30, 45 seconds. I'm just gonna run through the rest of these now. That's our finished product. I'm getting hungry already. It's not even cooked. Just gotta wait a quick 12 hours for this one to go overnight, and you can see what it comes out like in the next video. Okay, that about sums it up. That's how you prep the 4 most popular barbecue items to go into your smoker: beef brisket, pork butt, spatchcock chicken, St. Louis side ribs. If you want to learn how to load these and cook them properly in a Southern Pride smoker, follow along for our future videos.